I still feel that way. Don't you?
Yes.
That's why we're here. We all feel that way. There are setbacks, of course. That's what makes us stronger. Speaking of being stronger, I'm not that strong today. I arrived in Berlin a few days ago and immediately came down with this debilitating chest infection. I have a fever. I'm told I'm not contagious, so I don't think it's unethical for me to be here. I promised Felix and Emily I would be here. I wish I could have been here for more of it, but I've been at home, in the hotel room, in bed. So I have a fever, and you may hear me coughing a little bit. They brought me some tea. Thank you. Thank you, the angels of falling walls. So I'm going to probably bend the norms a little bit because just because I have like 101.5 fever right now, I decided to put my notes in my pocket. And just in case, I want to look at them. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. All right. So let's start with a little story. The New York Times. So everybody here know what the Federal Trade Commission is? So that's a federal agency in the United States. It now essentially has the oversight of all, commerce on the internet. So this is a story in the New York Times about what's happening on the internet, and it's one of these multi-stakeholder meetings. Whenever you hear the word multi-stakeholder, by the way, you should have your defenses up. Because that means that the gorillas in the room always win, and everybody else there is basically window dressing. So the industry executives were there, and they argued, and I'm quoting the reporter, that they were capable of regulating themselves and that government intervention would be costly and counterproductive. Is that surprising? Then the civil libertarians, all the NGOs were there. And they made an argument, and they said data capabilities, quote, posed an unprecedented threat to individual freedom. One of them observed, listen to this, we have to decide what human beings are going to be in the electronic age. Are we going to be chattel for commerce? Finally, a commissioner spoke up. And she asked, where should we draw the line? Okay, so what's interesting about this story? What's interesting about it is that this article appeared in 1997. All right, so who won? In case there's any doubt in the room, let's make it clear. It was the industry executives who won. And the fact is that line she was wondering about, that line was never drawn. And the executives got their way. And the fruit of that victory 22 years later is a new market form that has come to dominate our economies that I call surveillance capitalism. All right. So I'm going to give you a couple of little examples. The companies celebrated their new life in the internet because they called the internet the last ungoverned space. The thing is that power always fills a void. I'm sure you've noticed that in your work and in your lives. Power always fills a void. And the void of that ungoverned space was filled by surveillance capitalism, which is to say that now, in the year 2019, surveillance capitalism owns and operates the internet. We learn a lot about surveillance capitalism, unfortunately, from leaked documents and whistleblowers, which already gives you some insight into why it's called surveillance capitalism. Because it's engineered for secrecy. It's engineered to keep its populations in ignorance. Okay, so I want to tell you about one leaked Facebook document, 2017, written by Facebook executives in Australia about, in Australia, written for their business customers in Australia and New Zealand, okay? And this is about research that they have and the tools, methods, and mechanisms that they're pitching to their business customers based on the research that they had on 6.4 million students, young adults in those two countries, Australia and New Zealand. So we're talking about 6.4 million young people. And what the Facebook executives say is, by monitoring posts, pictures, interactions, and all internet activity, we can work out the exact time of day and the exact day of the week when young people feel stressed, defeated, overwhelmed, anxious, stupid, silly, useless, and a failure. Why is this valuable knowledge? It's valuable knowledge because, they say, with this depth of information, we can now give you the tools to pinpoint the exact moment in the week when, for example, a confidence-boosting message will have maximum probability of success. They're approaching the weekend. Anxiety is rising. You have a sexy black leather jacket to sell. Send them the message at this hour of this day. Tell them it will be delivered by morning free of charge. At a discount, you will make that sale. That was 2017, friends. 1 year later, 2018, a young man named Chris Wiley stepped forward. Familiar name? The Cambridge Analytical Whistleblower. In fact, he's just published his sort of memoir. Let me read you what he said in the first outbreak in The Guardian back in 2018. We exploited Facebook to harvest millions of people's profiles, and we built models to exploit what we knew about them and target their inner demons. Does that sound familiar? All right. So the thing is that Chris calls this information warfare. And he's right, because that kind of shadow warfare is built on asymmetries of knowledge, asymmetries of information. They call it information dominance. But guess what? Cambridge Analytica was merely a parasite. What was the host? The host was surveillance capitalism. Everything that Cambridge Analytica did, all of its mechanisms and methods, were simply imported and adapted from surveillance capitalism's daily, most routine activities. We're in the center of Facebook's computational factories. Trillions of data points are ingested every hour, and 6 million predictions of human behavior are produced every second. If Cambridge Analytica is information warfare, it points out something that we have been confused about. We have failed to recognize that surveillance capitalism and its illegitimate use of knowledge to power that you saw illustrated in Australia and New Zealand is best understood as a normalization and institutionalization of information warfare for profit. And it bears one message. I call that message caveat iusor. That's all of us. Invented in Google 2001, in the heat of financial emergency, the dot-com bust, surveillance capitalism rests on this claim that private human experience was to be the last virgin wood for commodification, translation into production and sales. Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims private human experience as raw material for translation into behavioral data. Those data, picture them being conveyed into pipes, complex supply chains, which move onto the conveyor belts of the new age factories. These are computational factories, but like all factories, they produce products, in this case, prediction products. These are products that are about us, but they are not for us. They are sold to business customers with a keen interest in knowing what we will do soon and later. These are a new kind of marketplace that trade exclusively in behavioral futures. These are markets of human futures, just like we have markets of wheat futures and markets of pork belly futures. They compete on certainty. The best predictions approximate certainty. This competition produces a variety of economic imperatives. Key among them, they need a lot of data to feed those AI. Totalities of data, economies of scale. They need varieties of data, economies of scope. Ultimately, they come to understand that they need to intervene in human behavior, intervene in the state of play, because the most predictive data comes from actually learning how to nudge and tune, coax and herd populations and individuals in ways that drive them toward guaranteed commercial outcomes. As one data scientist said to me, this is the shift from monitoring to actuation. We can engineer the context around a particular behavior and force change that way. We are learning how to write the music, and we let the music make them dance. These new mechanisms are celebrated by their practitioners for their efficacy, but also for one critical achievement: that they can prosecute these mechanisms and methods while continuously bypassing the awareness of their targets. Ergo, surveillance capitalism. Not a phrase intended to be melodramatic, but rather to show that revenue flows and profit depend upon systems engineered to keep us ignorant. These systems are on a collision course with democracy from below and from above. From below, they take aim at human autonomy, at individual sovereignty, everything that are the constituent elements of the imaginary of democracy. The big picture is one of asymmetries of knowledge and the power that accrues to that knowledge. This introduces an entirely new access of social inequality into our societies. Just in a moment in the digital century where we expected this to be the blossoming of a new era of democratization, we find ourselves marked by a new inequality that I call epistemic inequality. And this is instantiated in the growing gulf between what we know and what can be known about us. Knowledge means power. And that knowledge that comes from monitoring is translated into the power of actuation and behavioral modification, best exemplified in the growing abyss between what we can do and what can be done to us. So, I don't get time off for coughing, do I? All right. Final words. The young activist Greta Thunberg put the case succinctly. I apparently have not put it succinctly enough. Our house is on fire, she says, and she's talking about the planet. But if the planet is our house, society is our home. Under the regime of surveillance capitalism, our home is also on fire. But we're in Berlin today, and we come here full of hope for what Berlin has taught us and continues to teach us, that anything made by humans can be unmade by humans. Surveillance capitalists are rich and powerful, but they are not invulnerable. They have an Achilles heel. They fear law. They fear lawmakers who do not fear them. And they fear citizens of democratic societies who insist on a different road. Forward.